All right, welcome to the Productivity Show. How are you doing today, Brooks?
I'm excellent. The last time we recorded, we were in your apartment, so it's nice to have you back on the computer screen where you belong. Nice to be recording here with the dojo as well. It feels just doesn't feel right when we record without the live audience. So very happy to be back.
Yeah, and you have your new office space as well, I can tell.
That's right. So we talked about a long time on the podcast the reno we had in our house for a variety of reasons that took me a while to do my office, but finally, no more staring at my bright red wall in my window. Now I actually have books in my office again, which is nice to be surrounded by my books.
Yeah, it's really nice to see. And I always love peeking at everybody's setup and what they have going on. And so next time I'm in Vancouver, I would love to see what you have set up. But today, you and I are going to be talking about Evernote. And I just want to make sure I welcome everybody here. Hey, this is Tan, founder and CEO of Agent Efficiency, where we help people become more productive at work and in life.
Yeah, and I'm Brooks, the operations director, and we are the regular hosts of the Productivity Show.
So before we start off any episode, we always like to kick things off with our top 3 favorite resources so you get some quick wins right out of the gate as you're listening to this podcast. So Brooks, I see you have some of the resources that you've used lately that you really love. Would you mind sharing them with the audience here?
Absolutely. And since this is an Evernote themed episode, I thought we would have Evernote themed top 3 resources. So number 1 is the desktop scanner that I use, which is the ScanSnap IX 1500. I've used the IX 500 for years and years and years, but I've upgraded to the 1500, which is a nice touch screen, and it integrates. You can scan to Evernote with that scanner. Speaking to scanning to Evernote, my next resource is called Scannable. It's an app that makes it really, really fast and easy to capture things like receipts, documents, business cards straight to Evernote using your phone. Now, the downside of Scannable is that it is iOS only. So if you use an iPhone or iPad, no problem. But if you use Android, an app we recommend is called ScanBot, and it integrates with Evernote as well. And it's available on iOS and Android. And then the third recommendation is kind of a strange one because it's not one I have personally used, and I'll say why in a minute. But I did want to give it a shout out. It's called the Rocketbook Core. So the Rocketbook Core is a notebook that you use. You don't need a special pen, but Pilot sells a type of pen that works with it. And what it is, it's a reusable notebook. So you write on it, and then when you're done, you can just erase the pages using a damp cloth. And so you're not wasting paper. You're just reusing the notebook. And the nice thing is the pages are specially formatted so that with the Rocketbook app, you can capture it and send your scans straight to Evernote and then nicely format it, and you can send it to other services as well. The reason I don't personally use it is I have heard that it is not the best for left-handed people. My fellow lefties, you will know the struggle is real when it comes to writing and smudging. And apparently with the Rocketbook, that is a thing. So that's why I don't personally use it, but I've heard so many good things from people who love it. I wanted to definitely mention it.
Awesome. We will have links to all of these resources in the show notes. So just go to theproductivityshow.com/287 to check them out. Or if you're listening in a podcast app, just check out the podcast show notes in your app and you'll see the links all there. All right. So let's talk about Evernote, Brooks. And you and I have been Evernote users for a long period of time. And if you're listening today and you're thinking, well, I've never heard of this tool, Evernote. My question to you is, where have you been? I mean, this is a really popular productivity tool that's been around for over a decade now, and it can literally do almost anything. It could be a task manager. It can be like a reference file. It could be your primary note taker. It can be literally anything. It's so flexible and super powerful, yet at the same time, it's also its downfall, because if you just install it and you don't know what you want to use it for, people tend to kind of lose track of either using the app, or they feel really frustrated because now they have stuff all over the place and they don't really know how to use the app. So we want to talk a little bit about Evernote today and how you can make the most out of this particular productivity app that is extremely powerful. So if you're brand new to Evernote, we'll help you get started. And if you're somebody who has used Evernote for a while, maybe for over 5 years, we're going to share some advanced tips for you as well, so you can make the most out of this really powerful app. And before we start diving into the content, I want to announce that we're going to do some live training on Evernote. So this is something we've never done before. And if you've been a Productivity Show listener for a while, you know that we don't often do live trainings. But for this one time, we're going to do some live Evernote training. So if that is something you're interested in, you can register for this live training that's coming up next week as this episode is coming out at theproductivityshow.com/Evernote. So if you want to attend, go to theproductivityshow.com/Evernote. So Brooks, I want to hear from you. When did you first encounter Evernote? How did you get started with this particular app?
Yeah, I was curious about that. So I went into my Evernote database and looked at what is my oldest note. And so my very first Evernote note was in August 11th, 2008. So I've been using it, I guess, 12 years, I guess now, which seems crazy to me. I captured some notes. I was doing research about going paperless, which if you know me, probably not a big surprise. And Evernote since then has been a really big part of my workflow, my paperless workflow, my reference workflow. I flew to San Francisco and attended the very first Evernote conference. They used to put on conferences for maybe 3 or 4 years. So I attended the very first one in 2011. It was a very small affair. Actually, funny story about that. So the way the conference was set up, there was kind of 2 stages. There was a main stage where they would have the presentations, and then there was this small side stage. But the side stage was where everybody was eating. So these poor speakers would have to talk, but everyone was like eating and chatting while they were talking. And one of the speakers on that small side stage was this guy named Michael Hyatt. So it's so funny for me to think of now of someone like that who was, trying to speak while other people were eating their lunch boxes or whatever. But just goes to show we all have to start somewhere in this business. How about you, Dan? How long have you been Evernote? Are you an old school Evernote person, or what's the story there?
So I was digging around as well, and I also started around 2008. I don't have the exact date of my first note, but I started around 2008. I've also deleted a lot of notes when I first started off because I was just not sure how to use that particular app at that time. And so I've been, just like you, using it for about 12 years now. I've been to a lot of Evernote meetups. So I've never been to the actual conference, but I've been to a lot of Evernote meetups, especially here in Austin, which is kind of a hub for Evernote as well. And that's how I met Stacy Harmon that we had on the podcast a while back. I believe at 268. And she's an Evernote consultant. We have a lot of friends who are Evernote consultants now. And so I hang out with them a lot, and they always share the latest and greatest when it comes to Evernote. So I'm always in the loop of what's happening and what's going on and what it can do. And since I've been using it since 2008, I have like tens of thousands of notes in there. And that sounds like a lot, and technically it is a lot. But if you've been using something for so long, and you use it for almost everything that you do on a daily basis, it's not really that crazy to have that many notes. And so one hint or one tip I want to throw out there right away is when you use Evernote so much, you really want to become proficient at searching. This is something we've talked a lot about on the episode with Stacy Harmon, again, TPS287. And if you're not a good user of search, man, you're really underutilizing that particular app. So that's something I really want to share right out of the gate.
Yeah, we've and you and I have been using Evernote for a long time. We've also on the site covered Evernote and the podcast a lot over the years. The earliest Evernote specific episode I saw was TPS 50, so going way back. But I know I personally was on episode TPS 6, and I know for sure we talked about or maybe TPS 7, and I know for sure we talked about Evernote there. So now this is episode 287. So we've been covering Evernote for a very long time. Recently, like you said, Stacy Harmon, TPS 268. Also, we talked about Evernote a lot with Francesco D'Alessio very recently on TPS 273. And over the years, the site, the Asian Efficiency blog, asianefficiency.com/blog, is just full of Evernote resources. So you can definitely check and get a lot of stuff there.
But Brooks, over the years, we've been in this game for so many years now. We've seen productivity apps come and go, right? And one simple example is Things. Back in the day, Things was like a hot thing, and then that app particular it died off, and nobody was using it. And then it made a resurgence, and then everybody was using it. And now, I don't think I've really heard much about Things in the last year and a half, but it's kind of the same thing with Evernote. I find that some people still use it, but a lot of people have moved on. A lot of people are claiming that Evernote is dead and nobody's using it. What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's funny. Like you said, it does go through cycles, but I feel like with Evernote, it's even more pronounced than that. Like not only has the kind of attention to Evernote ebbed and flowed, but it was actually there for a while that people would be writing articles and and videos and even podcasts saying stuff like Evernote's in a death spiral or Evernote RIP Evernote and stuff like that. So it was like really, really pronounced, and I can kind of understand it. Evernote had a lot of management turnover. Their original Evernote management was very visible, and then when they left, there was some turmoil there. The product went quite stagnant for a while. They had a lot of technical debt that they needed to deal with, and maybe not totally sure what direction to go in. And then competitors came in like OneNote, Bear, and Notion, which, like I said, we just recently talked about on TPS273. People would all say they were all like Evernote killers. And some of them would even be smart and offer promotions or tools to help take stuff out of Evernote into these other tools. The thing about it, though, is that while all this was going on and all this chat, people who actually use Evernote, a lot of people anyway, they just kind of kept on using it. I kept on using it. You kept on using it. A lot of members of the Asian efficiency community kept on using it, and it's still. Even though some people did switch to these other tools, which are really great, Evernote still has a very loyal user base, and it's nice to see that things seem to be stabilized now. They're making changes on the back end. They're improving some of their experiences. They're being more transparent again, making YouTube videos and stuff like that about behind the scenes, sharing what they're working on. And so, no, I would not say that Evernote is dying. And it's great to see that it's starting to kind of go on an upswing again, which is why we wanted to have this episode.
Stacy and I talked about this too on our episode, again, 268, if you haven't listened to that one yet. And she's a firm believer that everything is going to be looking good and that it's on the upswing. And she is in close communication with the board as well and the people that are heavily involved with the product. And just based on my observation with my conversation with her and then other people as well, it seemed to be A-okay. And personally, I've never been worried just because I'm just doing my thing. And I'm the type of person that if stuff hits the fan, then, if I have to move stuff, it's not the end of the world. Yes, I do have a lot of notes, but there's a thing called mass export and stuff like that. So I was personally just never worried, and I just kept doing my own thing. So if you're somebody who's really worried about like, should you use Evernote and it's going to die anytime soon, is that a worry? I don't think you have to worry about that whatsoever. Just continue to use the app if that's something that you really like to use. And if you're afraid about losing your data or something, you know what? That could always technically happen with any app, right? But I think with Evernote, that's less of a concern. So I wouldn't worry about it at all. All right, Brooks, before we start diving into the 5 tips that we have for our listeners here today, I'm kind of curious, like, how do you use Evernote on a personal basis?
Yeah, and that's something we haven't talked about in a while. We've talked about, had guests on talking about their use of Evernote, but we thought we should revisit how you and I use it. So for me, one big thing that I use it for is research and capturing web pages. This is one thing that I personally think that Evernote still does better than anybody else is their web clipper. It's like the secret, not a secret, but it's like one of their killer features is it has such a great web clipper for capturing information on the web, cleaning it up and having it stored in a nice format. So I use it a lot for capturing stuff off the web, capturing research. I used it to capture note and conference notes and capturing books, notes that I take on books. Like just the other day, I posted a rather large set of notes to the dojo about a book from a book I had just read. I like sometimes sharing the notes with our online community, the dojo, and that was from Evernote. So I capture these things, and then Evernote's where we save them. And I talked about this a little bit in TPS245, which is about how you and I read and learn from books. And then we talked about it in taking notes from conferences in TPS 225. So you can check those episodes out if you want to hear more about how I use Evernote for those. Another thing I use it for is, and this is going to make it sound like I cook, which really I don't, but another thing I use it for is capturing recipes. Like occasionally there are things that I want to capture that I want to make later, or share with a family member if I think that they would like to make it. So I capture that. And this actually came in really, really handy this Christmas, because every Christmas, like I said, I don't really cook, but somehow I ended up with this rule that every Christmas there's this vegan trifle that I make. My dad really likes trifle, and most of my family has gone either vegetarian or vegan. So every Christmas there's this vegan trifle that I make. And back in 2012, I captured the recipe to Evernote using the web clipper, of course. And then I kind of reference it every year. This year, I actually went to the site just because I wanted to check it out, and that the whole website that this recipe was on is totally gone. So if I was just kind of using bookmarks and going back to that site every single year, I would have been out of luck this year. So I love this concept of not just capturing links to things, but the contents of things. That's what I use. Those are my main uses of Evernote these days.
I love that you said that you capture the content as well, because I think the concept of bookmarks is not that useful unless you store something for maybe like 24 hours or 2 or 3 days. Because like you said, sites go down all the time, and you just never know when you really need that particular information or a reference file. So I always like to store things. And the amount of data that you store and how much storage you have is almost negligible, in my opinion. A page might, load for like 1 or 2 megabytes or something. You have like tons of gigabytes available to store stuff. So you might as well capture the content while you're there. And Evernote is smart enough to be able to smart load and load things pretty fast. So you don't have to worry about that sort of stuff at all. And that's why I'm a big fan of using the web clipper, just like you. Anytime I book a flight, I have receipts, or anytime I have some sort of record keeping, anytime I visit a website and there's like a page that says, hey, please store this for your personal reference. I personally always use the web clipper for this. I don't like try to save it as a PDF or anything like that. Just dump it in Evernote and I'm good to go. Another thing that I like to store in there are body measurements. So as an example, since I'm working out a lot in my fitness and stuff, I'm tracking stuff in there and kind of like track stuff over time. Also, if you're somebody like me who does a lot of online shopping, I have like body measurements for particular brands as well. So for example, if I wear like Levi's jeans, then I might be like a size 30. But if I wear like this other brand called Frame, which makes really nice jeans as well, then I'm usually a size 29. And I don't have to remember these things where when I try to go order stuff. It's just in my Evernote file, right? So I have all these like different measurements, and different clothing brands have like different measurements. So you might be a small in one company, and then an extra small or medium in another brand. So that's something I always like to reference personally. I also use it for taking notes, just like you. So whenever I go to a conference or a mastermind, especially if there's a lot of chatter going on, for example, if I'm in a group setting, then I like to use Evernote because there's usually just a lot of ideas and stuff just going around the room. And I find typing that way to be much more valuable. Whereas if I'm just like in a workshop or a seminar, as somebody who does that too and does that for a living, where you teach stuff, you oftentimes see that there's usually one big thread going on. There's not a lot of like competing thoughts or people, multiple people talking at the same time. So in that case, it's really easy to kind of capture stuff on paper. So that's when I'll use like an analog tool. But other examples I use it for is like book summaries. So most of my book summaries nowadays are in Evernote. I used to use Mind Maps for this, but I kind of moved it away moved away from that because I wanted to consolidate everything. So even though I still like mind maps, I try to have fewer inboxes and data points, if you may call it that, so that I can easily find stuff. And then also I find that the search tool for Evernote is so powerful that if I need to search something for like from a particular book, or I don't remember what book I read it in, or I need to relearn a certain concept, then it's easier to do when it's in Evernote versus a mind map, because a mind map is really based on the book. You have to know what concept you were thinking of and in which book it was, and then open that mind map, blah, 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 right? So as you can tell, it's a little easier in Evernote that way. And then, yeah, one final thing that I use it for is so as somebody who runs a business, you're always studying the competition. You're always studying what other people are doing in different industries. And so I'm looking at different websites, their designs. I look at, their marketing materials and stuff like that, and their products and how they do things, their onboarding processes. Like I'm studying everything, right? And so I like to put all that stuff in Evernote as well. So there's a lot of things I use Evernote for, as you can tell.
I'm actually glad you mentioned that about taking notes or capturing things analog, because and we've talked about this sort of on the podcast before, but there's this almost like these two camps, like digital versus analog. But Evernote is perfect for combining the two. Like there's nothing wrong for people who love taking notes in paper notebooks. You love your expensive Japanese pens and your luxurious paper, people like that. Absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. But a nice thing about Evernote is you can then use those apps like Scannable, ScanBot that we mentioned earlier, and then still have it in your notebook, but you can have it digitally as well and capture it straight to Evernote using those apps. So it's like the best of both worlds. And especially one thing we haven't even mentioned is Evernote does a surprisingly good job searching your handwriting. So you can write in your notebook, capture it to Evernote, and then later you may be able to use Evernote search to find your notes that way as well.
I know this episode is only about 5 Evernote tips, but I feel like at this point we already have given at least 27 of them so far. So if you've been taking notes on this episode, let us know how many tips we've shared at this point. But let's actually dive into the 5 Evernote tips that we came up with that we think everybody should be aware of and should implement. And Brooks, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, so I'll start with tip number 1, which is don't overthink things. And this is really, really important when you're starting out using Evernote, because we mentioned earlier, Tan said earlier about how Evernote's it's super flexible. It's like a blank canvas, which is great because it is flexible, but it can be hard to know where to get started. And where a lot of people get hung up with Evernote, I've seen it a million times. I know Stacey Harmon has talked about this as well, is that people spend way too much time trying to come up with this perfect, fiddly, complex structure, or maybe they'll see some structure that somebody posted online or methodology, and they'll try to recreate it in Evernote. And it's not that there's anything wrong with that necessarily, but what ends up happening is you just spend a ton of time trying to figure out where everything should go, and then it becomes like friction. You don't get started because you're trying to figure this stuff out, and then you're worried that you're putting things in the wrong place. So for me personally, my recommendation is to keep your structure a lot more simple. Have fewer notebooks rather than a ton of different notebooks. You start with the inbox notebook, which is one that I use, that you capture everything to. And then if it makes sense, you can have separate notebooks for a personal stuff or a business or a project. If it makes sense, you can move those to other notebooks, but keep it simple. And like you said earlier, learn to search to find things and use some of the other navigation tips that we're going to talk about in a bit to get to what you're going at, versus trying to come up with this big, super complex hierarchical structure.
I love that idea. Keep it really simple, right? So don't overthink it. Just get started. And I don't remember who told me this because, again, like I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, I have a lot of people and friends in my life that are Evernote consultants or Evernote experts. And it could be either Brett Kelly or Charles Bird or Stacy. But I remember one of them telling me that the number one success factor for using Evernote is the number of notes someone has. in Evernote. And so when you think about that, obviously that makes a lot of sense. The more notes you have, the more you use the app. And if you're somebody who, and this was me like, I don't know, 13, 14, 15 years ago, where you want to come up with like the perfect like organizational system. You want to have like your tags laid out already before you even use the app, right? So you have like 15 tags you're going to use. You're going to have your notebooks already laid out. Even though there's no notes in there, you're going to use that notebook name, right? Called taxes or personal or work or whatever. Then you end up just procrastinating, honestly. Mm-hmm. So the best thing to do is just open up the app, start putting stuff in there, and by default, it will go into a certain notebook that you have in there. And I would also, like you have, Brooks, rename it to inbox and just call it that, right? And just put stuff in your inbox all the time. And again, the more notes you have, the more you use it, the easier it is to actually organize it over time. Because then now these are the kind of notes that I have in there. Let me organize them in notebooks if needed, or you can stack stuff if needed. And so again, the number one success factor for using Evernote is the number of notes that you have. So if you're somebody who's brand new to Evernote, just start using it, start putting stuff in there. If you have been using Evernote kind of like on and off, again, just put stuff in there and you'll see that over time, you'll just start using it more and more. And over time, you're also going to see how powerful and how great this tool really is.
How about tags? Do you use tags at all?
Oh man, do you want my rant version or the short version of this?
whichever you feel inspired to share. I'll leave that one up to you.
Okay, I'll keep it really short. No, I don't use tags whatsoever. Not a big fan of tags. And I'm kind of like on the Stacey Harmon camp on this. Anytime you put stuff in Evernote and you name it properly, then whatever content you have in there is already a tag in itself. Because if you use the search function really well, then you'll be able to find anything you need without having to use tags whatsoever. Now, I am of the opinion that you should be able to find most notes. You should be able to find most notes by just browsing to the appropriate notebook. So I'm a big fan of being able to just use my mouse to be able to find stuff. I know not everybody does that, but I like to organize my notes that way. So I know that if I go to a particular notebook, I know I can find certain things if needed. But that's just my OCD-ness a little bit, because that's how I also store stuff on my Dropbox, on my hard drive, on my computer, my external hard drives. I want to be able to find stuff if needed by just using a mouse.
Yeah, I don't really use tags very much at all. Like maybe when I started Evernote, like everybody, I used a lot, but now occasionally I'll use it for things like maybe events. If I have specific trips that I'm doing, I might use a tag to kind of bind all those together, even if they're in different notebooks, but generally, no, not very much. All right, so that's tip number one, don't overthink things. Tip number two, I'm going to take this as well, Tan, because I'm pretty sure I have a very strong suspicion that this is something I do or have done, but you don't do. So I'm just going to take this right on. And that's tip number two, which is create a project or topic or table of contents dashboard page. And this is something that you can do in Evernote that I feel like not as many people know about, but it can be really, really handy when you're doing things like managing projects in Evernote or having like client things or somewhere where you want to just have a dashboard that you can see what's going on and have quick access to a bunch of different notes. So what you can do is you can link pages in Evernote together. They're called notebooks. And so what you can do, for example, is let's say you had a project page and project for a client XYZ. And what you can do is if you have different things, like if you have status reports, meeting notes, research, you can definitely have them in notebooks all over the place, and that's totally fine. But you can also have one page, one note in your Evernote that has quick links to all of those resources. So you can just quickly get to what you need to. And a lot of people find that useful if they have trouble navigating around Evernote and finding things. So I used to do this when I did consulting. I'd have a dashboard page for the stuff I needed for that client and then links to each page. And pro tip for you, if you're interested in trying this out, there's actually a built-in way to do this, which is really, really fast and easy. And so what that is if you select a group of notes in Evernote, there'll be a button that comes up that says create table of contents. Just click that and boom, it will create a new note for you with links to all of those pages that you've linked to. So that's a fast little hack to try this out. Tan, do you do this, or have you seen anybody else do these type of dashboard pages?
I personally don't use it myself. I know Stacy is a big fan of this, and we talked about that on that particular episode. So, for example, whenever she goes on a trip and meets a client, she will create a specific dashboard, if you will, and have links to different things that she has notes on. So that's something that she likes to use, and I like the simplification of it. Right, like you said, it's kind of like a table of contents essentially. And another way to think about it is like you're creating like a mini Wikipedia within Evernote, so you can interlink within notes. But in order for you to access all of these notes, you can just go to one page where you have links to all the different notes that you need. And so I know somebody who does that is Lisa. She's a Dojo member, our private online community that comes for coaching and accountability. And she shared on our private forum that she uses Evernote, and so that she uses like a dashboard page as well, where she keeps track of all of her projects. So she has this thing called Project Dashboard. And then there's literally a table in there with different columns like notes, review dates, next action. And then every single row will have a link to a particular client or project that she's working on. And so she can always update it in a bird's eye view. She can see where everything is at. And then if she clicks on the link, it will go to that particular note in her app. And so that's something that I thought, oh, that's really useful. And the way we use Confluence at Asian Efficiency is kind of like that too. But now you can kind of recreate that in Evernote for your personal usage. And so if you're somebody who's ever used something like Notion for your personal use, it's kind of like very similar. Although Notion, I think, is more streamlined. It's kind of like more common when people use it for that particular use. Whereas in Evernote, I think it's less common, but it's really powerful. And I love being able to select a group of notes and then creating a table of contents with just one click. I mean, how simpler can it be, right?
Yes. So if you're somebody who does work with projects or clients or stuff like that, definitely check out this concept of creating a dashboard page. It can be really, really handy. So tip number 3 is to use Evernote templates. So if you're this was used to be way back in the day. If you're an old school Evernote user, you'll know this. Way back in the day, this was a big feature request, and people would come up with kind of hacks and workarounds and alternatives. They would share Evernote notes that you could import, and then reuse. Or what we used to have to do is you'd have a note that you'd create, and you'd put it maybe in a notebook called templates, and maybe you'd give it like a exclamation point at the beginning so that it would be up at the top of your list. And then when you wanted to reuse this note, you would right click, go to the templates, right click on the note, copy it to wherever you wanted to go, and then kind of go from there. So that was kind of like the old school hacky way of doing templates. But about a year or so ago, Evernote actually released a templates feature, which again, if you're a old school Evernote user, you might not even know about this, or if you have, you've heard about it but haven't checked it out. But it is actually very cool. So what they've done is they've created this template feature and then provided a template gallery. And there's over 50. I think there's, when I checked the other day, there's like 54 or 56 built-in templates. They have templates for life, for school, for work, meeting notes, project management, travel. There's even they must have some sort of agreement with David Allen Company, because there's even a getting things done section where you can import things like weekly review templates. And it makes it really, really easy to use. You just, when you're creating a new note, there's a template button. You just give it one click, and then right away, instantly in your note, you have this nicely formatted note that has everything set up just the way you want it to. And free users can use the built-in templates, but premium users can create your own templates. So if you want to have those reusable notes in Evernote, now it's way, way easier than it used to be.
Oh man, I wish we had a Asian efficiency category in Evernote. How awesome would that be?
Oh, there you go.
You can have a
You-
daily checklist of how to be Asian efficient. You can have a daily checklist for starting your morning. You can have a daily checklist for your evening ritual. And oh wait, that's that. What I just described is all in our rituals course. Never mind.
But if you do want to see if you want to check out the templates, we'll have a link to it in the show notes. You just go to evernote.com/templates, and you can see the different templates that they have, and then you can reuse them and bring them into your Evernote.
Yeah, so if you're a free user, you can use the built-in templates. And then if you want to create your own versions, then you'll have to upgrade to be a premium user, which I think is worth it. I've been a premium user for, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years. I definitely used the free version for many, many years. And then once I wanted to have like the additional features, I started to use the premium account, and I'd say totally worth it. So definitely an expense that I think is worthwhile investing in. So if you think about using templates, just think about all the different ways you could use it. But at the end of the day, in order for you to really implement this stuff, I recommend that you just implement one template and just get used to using that before you start implementing 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 different templates, and then you find yourself not using any of them. So maybe it's a daily task list, maybe it's a weekly review, maybe it's a meeting note template that you use with your team, or a one-on-one meeting with your team members. There's just so many templates in there that you can use. Just pick one of them and implement that consistently. And then you start to see how beneficial it is, how much time you save, how awesome it is. And then once you get into a habit of doing that, then move on to the next one. And then over time, you'll start to see that you start to use a lot of templates to save a lot of time. But if you start using 5, 6, or more than that at the same time, your chances of actually using them goes down quite a bit. So again, one thing at a time.
That's actually a great point, because the good thing is that there's 54, 56 templates. The bad thing is you go to that list and it's just like, oh, it's hard to know. It's like paradox of choice. It's like looking at trying to buy toothpaste or something like that. It's hard to know which one to go with. So yeah, just pick one, go with it. All right, so that's tip number 3, use Evernote templates. Tip number 4 is to use the Evernote web clipper, which we've talked about before, with Gmail. And Gmail is an example of one feature of the web clipper that is a little under the radar, which is there's certain websites that Evernote has put in a little special sauce so that when you use the web clipper on those sites, it does things a little bit differently. So if you're a Gmail user and you use the Gmail web interface, you probably know, you may or may not know, that whenever you open a message, it has its own special URL, and you can go to that URL to jump right to the message. Well, the Evernote web clipper is built to recognize that. So if you're looking at an email and you want to capture it to Evernote, this is something we talked about for many times. Example, back in TPS166, we shared what we call the Asian efficiency email workflow. And part of that is this concept of you want to get things out of your inbox, and especially things like reference information, as an example, you want to get out of your inbox because your inbox is not designed for reference storage. So if you have the Evernote web clipper, all you need to do is when you're looking at one of those emails you want to capture, you just hit the web clipper button, and what it will do is it recognizes that it's a Gmail message. It'll pop up a slightly modified window where you can actually choose which email messages in the thread, if you're looking at a thread, which ones you want to clip. You can clip the whole thing, or sometimes you want to clip the original message but you don't care about all the replies. You can choose to just save that original, and then it captures it nicely formatted with a link back to your Gmail email if you want to go back to that email and take some sort of action on it later. So if you're a Gmail web user, definitely check out the Evernote web clipper and practice capturing information to Evernote from Gmail.
Out of all the features that Evernote has, I would say this is definitely in my top 2 favorite ones. The other one being the OCR scanner, where it can scan your handwriting and recognize it. I would say those 2 are my favorite, and I use the web clipper all the time. And one of the things I didn't like about DevonThink Pro when I was using it was whenever I used their web clipper, what it would do, especially for web pages, it would reload the page. And this is a problem when you do some sort of booking online. Let's say you just paid something with your credit card, like a flight or something, and you have this confirmation page, and that page will only load one time. And if you try to reload it, it will say, oh, no, this page has expired. And whenever I use the DevonThink clipper, it would always reload the page, and then I wouldn't be able to save any of the information that's on the page. And the web clipper of Evernote doesn't do that. It will actually just read the page as it is and then store it that way. And even though I think DevonThink is more powerful in many ways because it has some sort of quote unquote AI features as well, where it can automatically sort stuff for you and organize things, it wasn't really good enough for me to stick with it because the Evernote Clipper is just so good. And again, one of my favorite features that it made me actually switch back to use that. That's how powerful it is, and that's how much I use it. And like I mentioned at the very beginning of this episode, if you're not using this web clipper, you're really missing out on life. I will make that statement. You will be missing out on life because it's just so powerful. And if you're not using it, you're really just shooting yourself in the foot because the amount of data you can store, is something you don't ever have to worry about. But it's just the convenience being able to store everything offline, all the sensitive, important information you need to have, and being able to access it very quickly with the power of search is something that I cannot state enough how powerful that is, being able to search something so quickly and having that access. So use the web clipper if you're not using it already.
Yeah, we've barely scratched on the features that the web clipper has. So definitely check that out if you do nothing else with Evernote. All right, so our fifth tip of our 5 tips, although spoiler alert, we have a bonus one that we added on. But tip number 5 is to use what I call the jump command. So if you've listened to the productivity show for a long time, especially when we talk about automation stuff, you'll know that both Tan and I love our keyboard shortcuts. It's just the fastest and easiest way and most efficient way to move around any application. And I always love it when a developer adds a keyboard shortcut that really just makes using the whole app easier. And Evernote has done that. So Evernote on the Mac has a command not too many people know about called Command J, which I assume means jump. And what you could do when you're in the Evernote Mac interface is hit Command J, and then you just type in a notebook name or a tag name or something like that, and you go right to that location in Evernote. So you don't need to be mousing around. You can just go straight to the area of Evernote that you want to go to. And same with on Windows, it's Command Q, which sounds like quit to me, but somehow in Evernote Windows, not Command Q, Control Q is what I meant to say. Control Q on Windows, and the same thing. It opens up what they call a quick search bar where you can just type in a notebook name, start typing. You don't have to type the whole thing. Start typing a notebook name or a tag and just jump straight there. So it's a really fast and easy way to navigate around anywhere in Evernote to get right to where you want to go to. And once you get used to navigating around like this, you'll just never want to go back. It's similar to a tip we shared with OmniFocus a while ago, Command O, which lets you do something similar in OmniFocus. Evernote has the same thing with Command J.
When I first saw the show notes as we were preparing for today's episode, and I saw this tip, and I thought, well, doesn't everybody know this particular shortcut? And then I realized, oh, actually, no, most people actually don't even know this. And I've been using this shortcut for, I don't know, like over 10 years now. So to me, this is like the most normal thing in the world. And then sometimes I forget that the most normal things are actually the things that some people or a lot of people actually don't know. So if you're not using this shortcut already, again, on Windows, Control Q, on Mac, Command J, man, it's going to change the game for you, honestly, because if you're listening right now, just go to your Evernote right now on your computer, type in Command J or Control Q, just type in a random keyword, and you're going to go probably to the note that you want to access. It's really that easy and that quick. And again, I've been using this for so long that I thought everybody knew this, but I guess not. So if you're not using this already, you really want to start using this today. So if there's any tip that you take away from today's episode, make this the one, because this is going to save you a lot of time. And when you go to our Automation Academy, our course for automation, this is the stuff that we talk about all the time too. Is like learning a few keystrokes or a few shortcuts of your favorite apps and being able to master those, because it's going to save you a lot of time. So another way to think about this is think about maybe your top 3 favorite apps that you use on a daily basis, and just learn one shortcut for each app. And if you do this consistently over time, you're going to be that person when you walk in and somebody looks at you typing and doing stuff, and they look at your screen and they go, whoa, what are you doing? And you're just like, oh no, I'm just typing, just finding stuff, doing stuff. That's the person you're going to be when you start to master your keyboard shortcut. So anytime I see Brooks doing stuff on the computer, it's like a violinist just playing an instrument and mastering it and just doing his or her thing. That's how I see it. So definitely use this shortcut.
If only I had some musical talent to go with that example, but sadly no. All right, so those are our 5 tips that we wanted to share for Evernote. So I'll just recap them again. Number 1, don't overthink things when you're starting out with Evernote, or if you want to go back and refactor your organization. Don't overthink things, just keep it simple. Number 2, create a project page or a dashboard page, which is a special note in Evernote which links to other notes. Number 3, use Evernote templates to reuse those notes and those things that you want to reuse over and over again. Evernote, check out the Evernote template gallery. Tip number 4, use the Evernote web clipper. Well, A, everywhere, but B, specifically with Gmail if you're a Gmail web user. And number 5, use the jump command or the quick search command to navigate around Evernote with your keyboard. Now, those are our 5 tips, but I wanted to share, or we wanted to share rather, one bonus tip, and especially because one of our Dojo members, Dojo Lifetime member, his name's Giacomo, shared this amazing tip with us and created a Siri shortcuts workflow. So unfortunately, this tip is only going to be for you if you're an iOS user. So apologies if you're an Android user. This is why we wanted to make it a bonus tip. But we did want to share it with you. And this is an area where you're definitely going to want to check out the show notes. So go to theproductivityshow.com/287, or if you're listening in a podcast app, go to the show notes section. Giacomo made this Siri shortcut that automatically lets you use your voice to capture information really, really quickly and frictionlessly, if that's a word, to Evernote. And so he put it together in this article called How to Capture Ideas Before They're Gone to Forever in iOS Shortcuts. So we have a link to that in the show notes. But basically, what you do is you install it on your iOS device, and he provides a link to the shortcut. So you just give it a tap and install it. And then you just need to say, add content to Evernote, and it will let you capture whatever's on your mind straight to Evernote. So we just wanted to give a shout out to Giacomo and share that as a bonus tip, and definitely go check out his article where he shares how that all works.
Yeah, thank you, buddy, for posting this, because I know a lot of people are going to find this useful, especially if you're somebody who does a lot of driving and you're like, oh my gosh, I have this amazing idea. I need to capture this right away and put it in Evernote, because that's where you store your notes. This is the type of solution that you want to implement. So definitely go check out that article. Again, it will be in the show notes.
All right, so those are our 5 tips and our bonus tips. We just want to wrap up and say that don't, like Tan said earlier with the templates, don't try to implement everything all at once. Just pick one of these, implement it, use it for a week, and then go back, master it, and then you can go back and look at the other tips. Eventually, if you implement all of them, your use of Evernote will be way more productive, but don't try to do everything at once. And like Tan said, we have this special live training coming up. You can go to theproductivityshow.com/Evernote, and there'll be a link to that where you can sign up, because you want to make sure to catch that. And then, as we said, make sure you visit the show notes at theproductivityshow.com/287. So thanks so much for joining us, and look forward to hearing how you're using Evernote.